JB Motorcycle Services. Hope you're all doing well in the new year. So after 4 months of owning my Vertigo Nitro, I thought I'd go through a few things that are kind of common issues and also things that I've spotted that I want to rectify to just improve the bike really. Reliability wise, it's been absolutely fine, but there is a few little things that I've spotted along the way in my journey of improving things and making the bike better, and little bits that I think will help the longevity and service life of the bike. So yeah, let's get into it. So one of the issues that people complained of in the earlier bikes was water getting in underneath where the ECU sits. This is battery assist model, so there's battery underneath here as well. So I'm going to show what I've done to help reduce the risk of water getting in and getting into the relays and filling up this area basically with water, which is, like I said, not ideal with the ECU being sat in there. Everything needs to be as dry as possible. So this is what I did to help that issue. So the first thing you need to do is take these countersunk screws out. When you pop them back in, just put a little bit of medium strength Loctite in, and that helps stop them vibrating out, because these bikes do vibrate a little bit. But you need to just take those bolts out, and then this whole rear mudguard slides off nice and easy. So as you can see, it's fairly dry under here. I give it a blowout. When I take this rear seat unit off, I always give it a little bit of a blowout, because a little bit of water does trap down in here right at the bottom, which I'm probably going to put a tiny little hole so to allow any residue water to come out but not to let any in. So the first thing I do is unscrew the rear light bracket, because a lot of water gets in here. You can see that's all sealed up. So I use, which there is other stuff on the market, but I use this Dow cooling stuff, multi-purpose sealant. So pop the light out, put some clear silicone around the whole light, screw it back down, and that will help reduce the chance of water getting in on the rear light. So you have some relays here, which is not the ideal way to position them, because obviously the electrical terminals are facing up. But as you can see in there, I've put some electrical compound to help reduce any chance of water getting into the relays. Every now and then, periodically, just pop them out, turn them up the other way, give them a little blowout and refresh the grease if needed. And it's always handy to check your battery terminals are tight at the same time. So another thing I noticed, there's a big hole in here where the wiring loom comes through. So I put some coarse foam in there to help reduce any water coming in there, because there is quite a big gap in next to the wiring loom, and if you're a pressure washer in cleaning the bike off, water will come in and sit right at the bottom of the battery tray. Like I say, I'm going to put a hole on the side where the side stand is, so that when you put it on the side stand at the lowest point, then any water in there should basically come out, and it will keep all this passage where the ECU and diagnostic cable is, it should keep that all nice and dry. So another place where water can get in is the airbox. As with most screws, just put a little bit of medium strength Loctite on the airbox lid. So remove that. The airbox should stay fairly dry, but there is a few issues in here that I've found that I will point out on when I get the airbox out. I'll show you on the bench, as it'll be a little bit easier to explain. Another thing I noticed on this, I think this is meant to be for letting water out, but the airbox sits at that angle like that. So the lowest part of the airbox is here, so all that, after you pressure washed it or done like a really like sort of stream section or something like that, it's gonna get water in. Like I say, there's a big hole there, and like I say, there's normally a big hole here, but I've cut the bit of foam so it slots in there, stays in there nice, will allow it to breathe. But if you look at the airbox lid, it breathes up through those holes, so that shouldn't be a problem. But yeah, so with the airbox like that, it's going to gather water in the bottom. So what I'm going to do is put this Scoiler adapter, I'm going to drill a hole right at the bottom of the airbox, and it is on the side stand side, so when it's tilted over, any water in there will sit right at this lowest point. I'm going to drill the hole out bigger in that, so that will allow it to drain out. I'm going to attach a little bit of pipe work to come down by the front water pump into the bash guard, so any water will drain out of there straight away. And with the long bit of pipe in there, it's not going to suck any water up, because it's not a vacuum airbox, but it will just help reduce the chance of water getting in and damaging the engine. Another thing I noticed on the airbox, these O-rings, the standard one is a tiny bit on the loose side. Every single time I've taken the standard one out, it basically bunches up and basically deforms here, so it doesn't sit in the seal properly. So I've got a little bit of rubber grease in there to help aid getting it in, but with the correct sized O-ring, it literally just pushes in, stops any water going down around here and into the throttle body, and when you take it out, it slides out and it's all still in one piece. Almost guarantee that the standard O-ring is, like I say, it'd be, if you can pull it out, it'd be out of that hole, so it doesn't create a very nice seal. The little bit of rubber grease around there each time you service the air filter just helps it slot back in nice and easy. There you go, look, if you look in that bottom corner, the lowest point, you can see the little ridge where the standard water drain is, and this is only through pressure washer in. The water's got in there, it's all sat on one side right at the bottom, so hopefully when I put my little adapter in there, this is on the side stand side, so it all gains in that bottom corner, and when I've done my mod, it should all drain out and the airbox will be bone dry. Another good thing as well, when you're cleaning the bike, obviously these chains, this is a standard chain, so they're probably not the highest of quality, but when you wash it, clean the chain off. Like I say, if you're using a pressure washer, use some degreaser. This chain is, like I say, obviously quite a few hours old now, but every time I clean it, I blow it off with an air line to get all the water out between the rollers and the pins, and then re-lube the chain. So do it straight after you wash it, because if you leave it overnight, the chain will go really rusty. So you want to clean the bike, clean the chain, blow it all off with an air line. Make sure, like I say, blow the chain off really well with the airline, and then re-lube it, and you shouldn't have no problems. The standard chain should last quite a while. Another thing I had was on the CSP bash plate, I had this water pump protector welded on, as I've seen a few people have issues with the water pump, so I got my local welder to fabricate something, and I've not had a problem since. So another thing I had to do with this bike, where after about 3 hours, like sort of 2-3 hours of riding, the tick over went really low and it started spluttering and would restart. You give it a rev to try and clear it out and it just wouldn't clear out. So I adjusted the tick over slightly. So the tick over was really like boom, boom. You could hear every stroke. Wasn't very smooth at all. So I feel it was running just a little bit rich, as it was so low on tick over, and it wouldn't clear out. So unfortunately at the moment these haven't got the Wi-Fi box available to reset your throttle position, so I was a bit hesitant about doing it, but my dealer is a little bit of a trip away, so I didn't want to, well, I couldn't take the time off working, like sort of get it to them. So I thought, well, I'll just adjust it, have a little go. It's a little bit tricky. You, like I say, you need only a few tools really to do it, and it only needed literally an 1/8 of a turn to tick over up, and you could hear it by ear that it was a lot smoother. I put a number 4 spark plug in it, and I've probably done 5 or 6 hours easily on it now, and it hasn't missed a beat. You compare my tick over to a lot of others and mine is a lot smoother and more consistent. So I feel that's definitely helped stop it fouling spark plugs. This is a 200 and I've heard of a few other issues with the 200s fouling spark plugs at very low hours. So I put a number 4 plug in it on recommendation, and like I say, pick tick over up a tiny bit, literally 1/8 of the turn, just to raise that tick over up a tiny bit to let more air through the throttle body, which will lean off the mixture to a certain extent. If you go too far, then the TPS sensor will probably tell the ECU that the throttle's opening, so chuck a bit more fuel in, so it will worsen the richening problem. But I literally only done it a tiny bit just to raise the tick over, and it has been absolutely brilliant since. So like I say, if you have problems with that sort of thing, it might be worth looking at. I'll quickly show you what to take off to make the job easier for you if you need to do it. So if you need to adjust the tick over, it's really tricky to get to. I found it easier to take this triangular engine brace off, and you need to get to that 7mm nut, I think it is. It might be an 8, and a very small Allen key. So I've basically put a paint mark on it that you might be able to see, so that it doesn't vibrate loose. But I literally put an Allen key in there, turn it literally a very tiny amount just to increase the tick over ever so slightly, and I haven't had to put a spark plug in it since. I know other people that have had to put like 2 or 3 spark plugs in every like sort of 2 to 3 hours running. It fouls up and makes the bike run really badly, so to a point where you can't clear it out. Put a new plug in it, it'd be fine for another 2 or 3 hours, but obviously you shouldn't have to do that. So I found picking the tick over up ever so slightly made it run absolutely perfect. No fouling of the spark plugs anymore, and it just makes it run fine. A lot of people say you don't need to adjust the tick over on them. I found that it was too low, you could hear it. So I increased the tick over a tiny bit, and all the running problems went away, and it's been absolutely fine. Thanks very much. So this is where I'm going to put the little brass takeoff for the drain of the airbox. As you can see, like I say, that little bit there is not going to do anything, as all this is still full of water. So I'm going to put it right on the corner there when it's on the side stand, little pipe down behind to the water pump, so any residue will just drain off. So another thing I did to help protect, it's got carbon fork guards on it all the way up. Another thing I did was thread the inner spindle, put these R&G crash protectors on. I also machined down some crash protectors to protect the frame here, and I also put in some frame protectors. These are half dome rubber plugs that help just stop the paint rubbing. I've seen nearly brand new bikes with 2 or 3 hours on, all the paint is rubbed off around here, so it will go rusty. These little plastic plugs help stop your boot rubbing all the paint off. And I've also got these R&Gs. I had to thread the rear spindle as well, so I put these crash protectors on the back. It's an expensive bike, I know they get crashed and scratched up, but I just want to reduce the chance of any damage, so I put those on. And I also went with the S3 rim protection as well. So yeah, it just helps look after the bike. I'm going to have it a long time, so I want to look after it. Another thing I noticed on the Vertigos is the steering lock. So standard, it sits quite away from the frame. I've shaved my steering stops down a tiny bit, just so that they're literally 1mm off of the frame, and it does improve the turning circle quite a bit. As you can see here, this is a standard one, it hasn't been modified. There's quite a big gap between the frame and the fork, so if you shave the steering stops down so it's just off of the frame on full lock, it still won't damage the frame, but you'll get a much tighter turning circle. So So when you're on the tight twisty sections, you'll get a little bit better steering out of it. So another issue I found with the Vertigo Nitro, and all the ones I've looked at are all the same. I only noticed this problem after the fan stopped working on one of my friend's bikes. The clutch and throttle cable come down right on top of this little brass connector, which is a pressure relief valve, because they don't have a radiator cap. They've only got this solid aluminium plug in the top. So what happens is the fan stops working, the system will pressurise up, and this valve needs to move outwards to release the pressure, but it can't because the clutch and throttle cable sit right on top of it. So what you need to do is just put a bit of lubrication on there, feed it in behind, so the clutch cable doesn't come anywhere near it. The throttle cable now sits behind the valve, so it can release the pressure, and then you'll see water coming out because it'll go on the exhaust, so you'll see the steam, you know, to stop the engine and diagnose, obviously, like I say, investigate and diagnose the issue why it's overheated, which will probably be either the fan stopped working or the relay underneath the seat unit. So that's another handy tip. Another thing you might want to change is the clutch feel with the lever. It was on number 1 to start with and was a bit soft. Number 3 is a bit too aggressive, so you need to take the clutch cover off, undoing these screws. Once the clutch cover off, you've got all these screws around here. You need to loosen off, try and take them off evenly without losing any of the fingers. And this changes the amount of preload on the spring, so it changes whether it's a soft clutch or a bit snappy. And it's on number 3 at the moment, and it's a bit too much. So this plate basically adjusts the pressure on the spring here in the clutch. So it was on number 1 to start with, and that was a bit too soft for me. I put it on number 3, and it feels stiffer at the lever, but it's a bit too aggressive on the release. So I'm going to set it on number 2 and leave it at that, and I'll ride it at the weekend. So that's how you adjust the clutch pressure. And like I say, if you want a slow acting clutch or a really fast one, this is how you change the different preloads on the spring in the clutch. Once you put all the springs back in, tighten them all up evenly and tighten them up to the manufacturer's torque specs. And also with the clutch outer casing, centralise the clutch push rod inside, and then tighten it all back up to manufacturer's spec and test ride it and see how you feel. The new style clutch cover, the machined aluminium one, just makes it a lot easier because you've only got to worry about taking this outer clutch cover off rather than the whole case. So it just makes it a bit easier, and it looks really good, and I feel it feels a bit smoother than the old clutch. So yeah, very nice bit of kit. So thank you everybody for watching the video. Hopefully you've learned a few little tips on the Vertigo Nitro to increase the longevity of it. Every 6 months I'm going to strip it down and re-grease all the bearings, wheel bearings, swing arm, suspension linkage, head bearings as well. So like I say, strip down every 6 months, it'll look after the bike the best that you can. So thank you very much for watching the video. Please like, share and subscribe, and drop a comment on the video to grow the channel, and thank you very much and take care.